Hello all, welcome to the Media Trust webinar, CYA 2023, 7 Digital Safety Trends for Uncertain Times. And yes, these are strange days indeed. Each morning we dread seeing news of more tech layoffs and rotten revenue reports from a soft fourth quarter. Threat actors are watching the tumult in the industry as well as stagnant programmatic CPMs and preparing extreme attacks that will exploit vulnerabilities on multiple fronts through ad tags, hacked brand websites, even URL syncs and ad supply chains. The cries to cut costs may be ringing like a banshee's wail, but this is no time to let your guard down. Sacrificing security and quality in the short term will only come back to bite you later with lost consumer trust. We're here today to help you through these uncertain times with confidence that you're protecting your brand and keeping consumers safe. We're going to dive into 7 trends that will be key to safeguarding the internet and helping you deliver better experiences and gleaning revenue. But first, a little introduction or maybe a reintroduction to the Media Trust. We are the premier provider of digital trust and safety solutions to publishers, ad platforms, e-commerce platforms, and enterprise companies. What's digital trust and safety? It's ensuring the well-being of consumers as they venture across the connected digital landscape. It's about looking beyond revenue and putting the consumer at the center of decisions. The 3 pillars of digital trust and safety are security, data, and content. 3 areas that we will examine in depth today. Now for us, I'm Gavin Dunaway, Product Marketing Lead, resident composer of ad tech parody songs, and your MC for today. More important, the experts. First up is Pat Ciavalella, Digital Security and Operations Director, the long-serving head of our highly experienced malware desk. Pat, coming into this tumultuous event, what threat do you think isn't getting enough attention?
I would have to say that scam attacks are the ones not getting enough attention, whether it's the e-commerce side or a tech support side. Those threats, they've been around for many years, and only certain attacks will actually get talked about. But the harm from these attacks is real, and it's continuing to grow and impacting just more and more consumers on a daily basis.
That is a very good point and a trend that we're going to discuss a little later in the webinar. Next, Corey Schnurr, head of Marketplace Innovation, one of the most knowledgeable folks in the ad tech space. Corey, from your vantage, what do you think is heaviest on the minds of ad tech and publisher professionals in this uncertain moment?
I think ad content. I think for a lot of years we spent a lot of time just focused on as long as there's not malware, there's not a problem. But I think we're kind of maturing as an industry and looking at the content that we're actually serving and whether that is right with our brand, whether there's, what adjacency looks like, whether or not we want to represent that kind of thing, be it disinformation, weapons, certain political views. And I think both platforms and publishers are starting to get a finer tooth comb on the ads that they serve, regardless of whether or not they're monetized.
I like that point as well. Now, before we dive into the deep end of 2023 threats, some quick housekeeping. We're going to save questions for the end, but feel free to add them in the question box in the lower right-hand corner. Also, we are recording this and we'll send you a link to the video. Feel free to share it with your colleagues. So 2023 hasn't been all bad. FBI and European law enforcement shut down the Hive ransomware group accused of extorting more than $100 million. But Hive was fueled by threat groups that were propagating phishing and other attacks through malvertising to grab credentials. Those groups have not been shut down, and they're still out there pushing the same malvertising, looking for new ransomware partners to do revenue shares with. When you shut down malvertising, you're not just protecting individual consumers, you're protecting their families and the organizations they work for or belong to, and you're protecting the people that rely on those organizations, like hospitals, a favorite Hive target. With that in mind, let's examine the growth of malware in the digital space. All the data you see here is included in our CYA 2023 report, which you will receive a link to after the webinar. Malicious incidents are typically grouped malware campaigns that account for thousands of impressions and which can impact millions of consumers. While overall malicious incidents are up 140% over the last 5 years, as you can see on the chart, they did fall by 28% between 21 and 2022. So, Pat, that leads me to ask, was there less malware in the space last year?
Hell no, man. So it's a result of 2 items. The first is threat actors are focusing on more successful attacks. So they're sticking with what works, which allows us to recalibrate how we use our indicators of compromise to create these incidents. So the incidents might be dropping, but there is still the same amount of malware. There's still more persistent threats that are taking place, and it's continuously growing on a day-to-day basis for us.
I think what kind of adds to that is the fact that we had a number of new name threats that appeared this year, with a few of them really dominating the malware circuit in the second half of 2022. Let's take a look at 2022 by the numbers. Corey, let me pick on you. What stands out to you here?
I think right off the bat, you look at the volume of impressions. I mean, I think even that's a conservative number, and considering all that platforms work with upstream to stop those from delivering in the first place. I mean, if you look at all the other places where that can permeate in the industry, 1.3 billion impressions is quite a bit of reach. So, I mean, and I think if we expand that number on, you're going to see billions and billions more. So yeah, that to me is a shocking number. If a billion impressions doesn't, make you sit on your butts, then I don't know what else will.
Definitely. I found that extremely eye-opening. Pat, let me throw the same question to you. What stands out?
I would have to say the increased attacks on the elderly. The vulnerable portion of the population seems to be a target that is continuously trying to be exploited by these bad actors, and it's discouraging to see them constantly trying to take advantage of them.
I agree 100%. Now we've used some terms already that probably need a bit more context. Pat, in 2022, your team unveiled a new threat classification system that you guys have been developing for some time. It's a really great complement to the recently introduced malvertising taxonomy from TAG, the Trustworthy Accountability Group. That offers universal definitions for redirects and other attack vectors. But Pat, what's the purpose of threat behavior, and how does it bring clarity to the digital landscape?
So the primary purpose of this was to simplify the threat details for end consumers and clients. So when my team talks about different attack patterns and rootkits or keyloggers, most people have no idea what that really means. So we want to make it as uniform as possible so that people can understand what it is that's taking place to the end consumer and how it's going to impact them.
Very good point. So let's take a look at some samples here. So these are backdoors. What does it backdoors do?
So backdoors are typically designed to execute code onto a machine. So it's things that will take place in the background, either unbeknownst to the user, or the user will actually allow certain things and download certain programs onto their machine. So those ones are definitely the bigger bucket that are far more tumultuous, I guess.
I like that. And, they can lead to bigger attacks, right?
Yes, these definitely are ones that the program sitting on the machine is going to then be repurposed and updated for continuing attacks onto the consumer's device.
And so phishing, we all know the term, but give us the layman's take.
Sure. So phishing attacks are pretty cut and dry. Most people know them as, these fake pop-ups that occur, but the majority of the population is going to look at it and go, oh, I know that when I see it. I don't have to worry about phishing attacks. But let's be honest, there has always been that occurrence where you click on the wrong thing, or you go to a Google search ad and you click the ad instead of the result from whatever it was you're searching. And unless you're paying really close attention, that spoofed landing page could easily fool most of the consumers in the ecosystem right now.
We hear about such things all the time. I was reading about it earlier today. What about scams? How do these differ from say, phishing?
So scams are more to defraud a consumer. So they're trying to steal information, steal money, promise items that are just, outlandish, too far-fetched to actually be true. But to many consumers, it seems like a great deal. They're going to go for it. They're going to bite.
Makes sense. So let's jump right into our trends now. Number one, as Pat mentioned earlier, targeting vulnerable consumers. Between May and the end of 2022, attacks aimed at children 12 and under increased by 3.7x. While malicious campaigns targeting the elderly rose 180%. Most of these were backdoors, as Pat was describing before, lots of software install prompts. The two main attacks were name threats, Dolos and Phony Fetcher. Can you explain, Pat, what makes these threats stand out?
Yeah, so these threats are definitely very crafty and persistent in what they do. So when people see the Microsoft brand name on their Microsoft computer, they think, I have an issue. I need to talk to Microsoft directly to get this problem solved. So they will, reach out and potentially become more infected and more impacted by these. The sad truth is that these attacks work. They're actually getting what they are intending when they launch these attacks. And it's discouraging, but there's no need to worry. The digital trust and safety team is here. We got your back and we'll get it covered.
Very nice, very nice. Yeah, no, I saw one of these today, and I'm a Mac user now. Even I kind of took a pause for a second, like, whoa, am I locked out of my computer? So they're pretty good on the landing page front. Um, Moving on, let's talk about GhostCat. Now, GhostCat has been a super menace to the digital space since 2019, targeting mobile devices with phishing redirects. It seems like history is repeating. Pat, why is GhostCat prime for a new assault basically any day now?
I would say it's due to the new reaches from this threat group. So they're beginning to change into which networks they're actually poking on and starting to utilize. So it looks as though their trial phase is already imminent and it's potentially beginning. And usually when this takes place, it's going to lead to quick change in spend, blast out as many impressions as they possibly can, and hopefully get consumers.
Wow. And because we saw something kind of similar, if we look at that chart, like in June, that was the testing phase, just like a whole bunch of different incidents, right?
Yeah. So it started out, they tested across the board with lots of different areas. And then, of course, shortly after that, that's when they actually launched their attack.
So, GhostCat stands out to me because the ad code, it doesn't contain creative or landing page URLs. It's really strange to me that other malware campaigns do a lot to hide their malicious intent, but GhostCat is just out there, letting its malware flag fly. What's the strategy there? Eh? Why does this attack boast such longevity?
I would say it's because it's working. Their attack pattern is just working, plain and simple. So, of course, they're going to update their code, change around their payloads, and use slightly different tactics. But for the most part, everything is continuing the same because they're having success at it. So why would they fix what isn't broke? Even if their creatives are broke and won't actually render a creative for the end user.
Yeah, I think it's something definitely designed by somebody who's been in the industry, right? Because it takes advantage of a lot of things that platforms typically look for. They're looking for a landing page to scan. They're looking for an A domain. They're looking for a creative. It's not uncommon in this industry for an ad to break and there's a blank or an impression that isn't counted. So I think they're using tactics that the majority of us ops people and people that have been in the industry for long enough go, oh, that's normal ad behavior. There's 100 reasons that could cause an ad to do that, and I think it's a perfect way to kind of skirt by and then just kind of rapidly change the host, and that's something that's a lot harder to detect.
Good point. And of note here, right before the Ukraine invasion by Russia, we saw a 5x increase in attacks on Ukrainian consumers, leading the phishing brigade, GhostCat. So let's jump over to compromised brand websites. This has been a huge jump this year. I mean, why bother paying for malvertising when you can hack a brand website and have them serve your malware? It's becoming more prevalent, especially with corrupted JavaScript libraries. When we see publishing software is out of date, many brands don't even know they've been hacked. Hacked websites with e-skimming doubled year over year, growing more than 3x since 2020. E-skimming in the past was very focused on stealing credit cards, but newer attacks are seeking a wide assortment of data, notably credentials and logins, the kind of stuff that fuels ransomware networks like Hive. So e-skimming is not the only type of attack we've seen on hacked brand pages. The fastest growing threat of 2022 was Mimic Manager. Pat, why does Mimic Manager stand out among hacked website threats?
So there's definitely lots of different threat groups and threat actors working to deliver a variety of malware. Some use very advanced targeting, some use different layers of obfuscation, some collect data to use for future attacks. But this attacker was definitely delivering a threat designed to install code onto devices. They want to take advantage of legitimate companies and drive malicious content to the end user in a way that hopefully bypasses the ad checks for the ecosystem. And this one used a variety of tactics to ensure that they would deliver to the proper individuals. And to make matters a little more unique, they would use very similar JavaScript styles and file paths so that they could hide in plain sight and actually only deliver the malicious content to the end users that they wanted to.
Wow. So yeah.
Oh, Gavin, I can't hear.
What the heck?
There you go. You're back.
That was weird. Anyway, yeah. So, but as I was trying to say, yeah, you could tell an advertiser, yeah, your page is hacked, and the advertiser goes like, I just went to it. There's nothing wrong. That's devious. Okay. Corey, let me throw it to you though. What's key for ad platforms in managing the growing threat of hacked brand websites?
I think it's important to be scanning advertiser landing pages, right? Like advertisers are victims too, in a lot of ways that this happens. And a common thing we hear from large platforms is, we work with the big agencies, we work directly with brands, we don't work with advertisers, we don't work with networks, we don't have this problem. And I think it's, very, very clear that there is something that kind of lives beyond the tag. And the tag itself, and even the intention of the advertiser, is not to be malicious, but if the page itself is the problem, then you're still going to have an issue with that campaign and where you're sending users. And so I think it's, for platforms to understand that it's not necessarily the fact that you work with a major agency or directly with the brand. They are victims, and we have seen some pretty major brands impacted by this kind of attack.
Very true. We have stories to tell. Talk to us later. So also another thing that has been growing is exploiting threat actors, I should say, exploiting URL sync errors. The biggest one that happened this year was October-November broken cookie sync between two platforms, erroneously using the test domain dummy.com. It was exploited to deliver a variety of unwanted content and malware to brand, entertainment, and news media websites. Numerous major ad tech players were involved, serving ads to hundreds of publishers, potentially millions of consumers. On-page, in-app creative blockers were not able to protect consumers from this attack. It was actually the malware itself was coming through the URL sync. We're seeing more of these cases. We also sometimes see them through zombie ad tech, where a defunct ad tech company sends people malware due to usually an ancient URL sync. The onus seems to fall on ad platforms to prevent these. What can they do, Corey?
Sorry, I had a little headphone issue. Missed you for a minute there, Gavin. But yeah, this is one that we see occasionally, but I think the biggest challenge with this is that, as you mentioned, it's not something that you see in an ad tag or that you see within an iframe. It's something that's occurring on the page. And I think platforms, and I know I was one of them, set up your user sync pixels with your partners right at the beginning of an integration, and that could be years from now or years ago, right? And so you end up having this code that you never look at that was put in by somebody that has nothing to do with the ad operation side of things. And so having some sort of regular cadence where you're actually checking on this, be it quarterly, be it at least, yearly, and looking at these partners and understanding if you deactivate someone as well, or if you have something where a partner that you had in 2017 is no longer active, you really should go and look at, okay, what else, how else are they integrated with our system? And I think a lot of that zombie code, the great example that we saw was from a DSP that went under in 2016, and every other SSP under the sun still had that integration live with that user sync. It was going nowhere until it was, right? And I think that making sure that you're looking at this and that the ad quality and marketplace quality teams are speaking to their product teams, that when partners get deactivated over the years, you're saying, who are we still doing user syncs with? Is kind of going to be a key point of stopping something like this.
Every time we see one of these attacks, I usually get a whole bunch of nostalgia for ad tech companies past, but I still don't want to see the malware. Let's move on to advanced cloaking and obfuscation. Threat actors are always evolving how they hide their malicious intent, and we unfortunately saw some impressive leaps in three named threat this year's Kronos that uses mobile authorization tokens. It actually drops mobile authorization tokens, uses link shorteners and multiple redirects. It's got a very sophisticated decision tree. Mimic Manager, we already mentioned, grabs data to better tailor attacks and sometimes even chooses not to. Dolos has an expansive portfolio of fake creative and landing pages to feign legitimacy of tech support of its tech support scheme. So, Pat, what obfuscation techniques most concern you, and how can they be countered?
So I would say the ones that most concern me is the fact that more viewability JavaScripting for fingerprinting. As part of the fallout and collateral damage from the fight against ad fraud, anti-fraud tools and advertisers themselves, they're starting to fingerprint to make sure they deliver their ads to legitimate users and not deliver to the bots. So legitimate advertisers use that code to load a PSA when it hits a bot. The same exact coding style is used by the malicious actors to find bots versus real humans. They flip it around, do it a little backwards, and deliver the malicious content to the end user and benign content over to the bot traffic. So these ones are definitely very concerning because it's becoming standard practice in the advertising ecosystem. So we have to make sure that we're doing a far more diligent job looking into the coding patterns and key identifiers to create the IOCs that only the bad guys are utilizing to make sure we can identify the malicious campaigns versus the clean ones.
Wow. So they, just the bot traffic you're referring to, the malware guys are looking out for. That's like the malware hunters themselves.
Yeah. So the malvertisers are basically trying to avoid any scanning, any non-legitimate traffic so that they can send clean advertisements to it, make themselves look good when somebody does a quick check of it. But when it actually goes to the real world, that's when the secondary campaign will get executed and the other code injected behind it.
Wow. Talk about an unintended consequence of viewability there. Incredible. So let's talk real quick about e-commerce scams. Pat mentioned this earlier in his introduction. Worldwide e-commerce sales that continue to grow at an astronomical rate, and so do bogus retail operations. They've flooded the ad pipes looking for consumers to defraud. Scam e-commerce companies, their antics range from non-delivery to incorrect delivery of goods, no restitution options. Media Filter, our real-time ad quality solution for publishers, it blocked more than 950 million scam ads in 2022. That's 83% more than the prior year. Definitely scam e-commerce is a threat in tough economic times, as put upon consumers are going to look for deals. So also on top of that, no surprise, governments are increasingly cracking down on online scammers. So our last topic for today, last but definitely not least, sensitive and regulated ad content. A funny thing happened on fourth quarter 2022 alongside the spectacular crash of FTX. Publishers started blocking crypto ads. These are some of the most blocked ads of 2022, and as you can see, some of them look not quite on the level. Corey, I have to imagine industry perspectives on crypto advertising are rapidly shifting. What are you seeing in the market?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I blame Larry David, but I think in all seriousness, the FTX, crash and issues and everything that kind of surrounds that, I think was a big eye opener of everybody was going hard into crypto, saying this is generally innocuous and everybody's trading crypto coins. We can't keep track of Doja coin versus the next one. All of a sudden they're saying, wait a minute, maybe we got to be a little bit more careful, because if something like this is going to occur, and if the government's going to go after these companies, then regulation's going to follow. So I think companies are now trying to get ahead of or recreate policies and be a little bit stricter around what they're running in terms of crypto advertising, cryptocurrencies.
Totally. So some other interesting trends. Political ads, we ended up grabbing a great deal of nuance to our political ad category, adding LGBTQ, immigration issues, Second Amendment. We had a massive inflow of abortion-related ads right before the big Kansas referendum in July. as for sensitive category blocking, we saw a lot more gambling creative in the U.S. as many states changed their laws in 2022. It was number 2 of all of our categories blocked, and we have very many of them, more than 40. Very interesting there. Corey, do you have any insight into sensitive regulated categories that will be, let's say, extra sensitive in 2023?
Yeah, I think, when you look at some of this trend, I think there's going to be more scrutiny on tobacco and, smokeless tobacco, vapes, different type of nicotine products. I mean, as the FTC kind of starts changing the rules and passing more laws, we saw Juul on again, off again the shelves this year. I think that does change how people are going to look at those products, and kind of it's a sensitive area because tobacco already is regulated. So how does that look when that kind of spans out? So I think further development of tobacco and nicotine-based products is going to be a huge part. And I think weapons. I think there's a growing use of weapons and kind of what constitutes weapons. We have some partners that care very much how a Nerf gun is used, but believe it or not, we also saw a land-air missile being advertised this year. I mean, it was a learn more button instead of a click to buy, thank God. But there's still, definitely a rise in considering what does it mean when we talk about what weapons can be advertising. It's not always just a gun.
That's for sure. That still cracks me up. I wonder who that was targeted at. All good points there. I know we got started a little late. Very sorry for that. Had some technical difficulties, but we would definitely love to take any questions if you got them. I've got a few right here. One that we get a lot. Why should I care about hack brand websites? It's the landing page. I still get paid for the ad.
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, if you look at that is kind of a traditional way of thinking through the space. And if you look at it kind of from two lenses, one, from a trust and safety and consumer in mind, you're still protecting that consumer, which is important, because if you're relying on e-commerce or affiliate business as a publisher and somebody gets scammed out of a whole bunch of their money, well, they have no more money to spend on your site. So that's the thing. I mean, that's first of all one of the problems with protecting them. But there's also, I think the general community has decided, like part of tag requirements in the tag community is that the landing page assets are a part of what is monitored and what is protected to protect that end consumer. So it's not necessarily a buyer's beware situation on the internet anymore, and it definitely shouldn't be as we get regulated and there's more scrutiny coming to all the major platforms. And what part of responsibility lives in privacy. I think there needs to be that same sort of responsibility in what lives in the world of the actual ads that we deliver people to.
I think that's well put. So I got another one about what's the future of AI and malware, and that's kind of funny because I just read an article that ChatGPT was used to create malware the other day. So that's definitely one angle, but I think we're already seeing some other ways that AI is being leveraged. Pat, do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, so I definitely think people will take advantage of utilizing AI, especially when it comes to building out different, landing pages at scale or different attack patterns. They're going to utilize the tools that are available to them. I still think there's going to be a big human element behind it, but that being said, it's fair game. If something's easy to use and easy to propagate, why not go that avenue?
Got a good point. And I think we're already starting to see some of this with a lot of the made for advertising networks taking over instead of using content scraping, using like ChatGPT and other types of AI content creation to give a bit more legitimacy to it. Let's see. I got a question of where are you guys seeing more threats, mobile or desktop?
So I would say mobile is definitely a bigger target for the sophisticated attacks. Bad guys want to be on that device and get as much information as you can, because most of the population saves everything in their phone. They're going to save their credit card information. They're going to save all their login credentials. Everything's going to be inside of that phone. So if the bad guys can get access to that data point, they no longer have to worry about trying to scrape every single one from an e-commerce site, etc. So I think the sophisticated attacks are definitely targeted towards the mobile environment. But that being said, desktop, it's not going away. Nobody is not going to target desktop users, especially when it comes to the elderly. They spend more time on a desktop than they do on their phone.
Now that definitely the hacked website problem really comes into play there. I mean that those could be anywhere. And we saw they lots of Dolos, the tech support scam creative coming through hacked websites as well. It's yeah, no, that's a huge vulnerability. Let's see what else I got here. I've got one more. Is there industry concern about shutting down government political disinformation in advertising?
Is there industry concern? I mean, absolutely. I think the problem is it's sort of like you don't bite the hand that feeds you situation, right? And if you look at the government regulators that are coming at this every time there's disinformation and things related to political campaigns and ad spend, there's now more eyes on it than what sits in our little world. And I think, I've spent over a decade in the industry, and it can sometimes feel very insular, right? I'm thinking in impressions, and I'm thinking in discrepancies, and thinking in volumes that don't matter to the rest of the world outside of that. But as soon as you start talking about disinformation, it's front page news on the Times, right? And all of a sudden that bad thing that you were either complacent to or just didn't have the means to try to protect against, you're now on the hook for. And so I definitely think you're paying attention to those kind of things and making sure that you're on the right side of that argument when regulators come a knocking is probably the right place to be.
And the other interesting thing there is there's more as Corey, you've been banging this drum that there's a lot more attention to being paid to the content. Then there's the worry that political actors and governments, they start using malvertising techniques to hide, using cloaking to hide what's their actual messages, especially disinformation. I've got a couple of other interesting ones here. Do your partners typically leverage categorization insights to inform their buyer requirements in the same way they may have used malware insights previously?
Absolutely. Yeah. We have some partners who, when they start working with us on their ad categorization tools, want to know what is even flowing through their pipes so that they can help inform their policies. And we have other partners who are looking at that, and every time they're looking to make a change to their policy, be it weapons that I mentioned earlier. Okay, what are we going to do about smokeless tobacco? What are we going to do about weapons? They're using that as sort of a baseline to understand, well, how big is the problem? What is the problem? And what can I look at to determine that, right? When it's malware and it's bad, it's kind of binary. We all agree that that's bad. But when you look at, a shade of a weapon, or you look at a shade of tobacco or CBD versus THC, there is so much gray area that needs to be decided on a policy level that really understanding what flows through the pipes in the first place definitely impacts kind of the policies that a lot of platforms and publishers create and then try to enforce following that.
Yeah, it's tough. The kind of blanket blocking technique, yeah, it just simply doesn't apply. I mean, it really is about human interaction and humans making decisions.
Yeah, and sometimes your advertiser, if you're closer to the advertisers could be running a campaign that you work with the advertiser for a long time, and otherwise the spend and everything is fine, but there's a particular creative that kind of pushes it and gets a little bit close to the edge, particularly when we talk about provocative content. It can sometimes be like, okay, have a conversation with that advertiser and decide what creative makes sense. It doesn't always need to be an all-out ban, as if you've found a malicious actor sitting on one of your seats. There is often a conversation that needs to occur and an education that needs to happen. And so kind of having a view from a policy standpoint and from a quality standpoint, being able to look at everything that flows through the pipes and then kind of make informed decisions and educate your partners to make sure that that all lines up doesn't mean you just have to fire people, right? You can absolutely adjust. And a lot of partners appreciate that kind of feedback because, they can want to continue to have that relationship with you.
And, for publishers, something kind of similar applies. I mean, you don't have to just block a whole category of ads. You can look to see what's coming through the pipes and kind of choose one by one, like, hey, no, not that one, no, that one. I mean, crypto is a great one there. Not all those ads that we saw on the other page are some of these look legit and they're from legit companies. Other ones are like, oh no, that reeks. So there's more nuance involved than just block. One last question I think we have. What do you see with video versus display? I think that's more talking about malware, but I mean, I think there's probably an interesting content question there too.
Yeah, so when it comes to video and malware, I'd say the most prolific one we see is the fraud content. So people will try to take advantage of video and put extra content behind the scenes so that even when one video is running, a second may run in the background, other impressions might run in the background as well. So that's typically what we see is the fraud content when it comes to the video world. Most people aren't trying to exploit video as frequently as display. Display is definitely far heavier when it comes to, the redirects taking place or the actual malicious payloads coming through in ad delivery.
Yeah, I want to add to that. I think, a part of that reason is because display is so much cheaper and it's so much more proliferated, and there's a lot more different, places that you can go with that. Video is still growing programmatically, and it's expensive to get in. So if you're going to do an attack, you got to really make sure it works and it's going to pay out. So I think that's a huge part of it. And there's no browsers, right? So it's not like there's going to be necessarily an app store redirect or something that would otherwise happen in a mobile browser or in a desktop browser. There's also a lot of technical quality concerns, right? So if you look at holistic quality, what makes an ad bad? Well, an ad that breaks an ad pod and can't serve and stops a streaming service or a fast service because the pod is broken the ad and the user has to restart, or they get that spinning wheel of death on their CTV device, is a huge part of quality, right? And looking at how that quality is delivered, whether or not it's even malware to even get that ad to render properly is a much bigger focus. And again, that's typically easier, and we have a lot more experience with it as an industry in display.
Well put, well put. Well, guys, we went a bit over. I'm very sorry again about the technical difficulties. Let me leave you with some closing thoughts here and some recommendations going forward. With economic uncertainty, stay vigilant. With economic uncertainty comes the call to cut costs, but sacrificing digital security for cost savings can have dire consequences. Threat actors are anticipating digital companies will let their guards down, and they're already probing for vulnerabilities. Increase your scrutiny. As we've talked about through this whole half hour, they're constantly improving their obfuscation. I hate that word. Obfuscation tactics, including hiding their malicious intent via cloaking, using innocuous creative and code to fool security audits. They actually use viewability technology to do this. Absolutely incredible. Weeding out threats and rescuing victimized advertisers requires continuous review from a variety of device profiles and analysis of tags, creative, click-throughs, landing pages. And finally, get connected. The ingenuity of threat actors is highlighting the limits of on-page in-app blocking of malware and unwanted ads. Digital publishers, ad tech platforms, e-commerce companies, and even enterprise brands with consumer-facing websites, they need fluid communication channels to share and quickly remediate incidents as they flare up in order to maintain revenue. Keeping consumers safe requires digital companies to get closer, better know each other, and work more effectively with each other. And with that, I'm going to let you all go. No more questions. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today, and you can reach out to any one of us at any time. Thank you so much, Corey and Pat, for gracing us with your expertise, and we hope to catch you all in the future. You will get a video of this as well as a link to our CYA 2023 report. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.